Welcome, everyone. This is our first in-person meeting for quite some time for the HOF. Dollar Bank has been generous enough to offer that we can have meetings here if the space is available. So we're going to do our absolute best to make sure we can be in person as much as we can. We want to hear voices. We want to see facial expressions when we're having discussions. We really want that integration and viewpoints. So we're going to do our absolute best to be better with our outreach going forward. So we're going to kick off. We do not have any registered public comment, but is there anyone who's joining us that would like to make a public comment? Don't be shy. There will definitely be other opportunities, so we're going to go ahead and get started with the agenda. And I believe our first item is the roll call. If folks need the ASL interpretation, you can access that. You want to pin Joan or Chad to your screen, and then you'll be able to follow along with the comments. I can't see whoever is online, so I apologize. This is going to be a little clunky. Lena Andrews. Jamil Bay.
I am here.
Hi, Jamil.
Hello.
Tammy Thompson.
Here.
Thanks for being with us, Tammy. Karen Garrett.
I am here.
Hi, Karen.
Hi.
Councilwoman Gross. I know Mark Masterson is with us. Mark?
Here.
Deidre Washington. Marcus Reed. Dr. Spradley.
Here.
Alan Cisco.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Alan. Derek Tillman. Adrian Wanaha's present. Kelly Ware. Okay, we're also joined by our URA staff. Thank you all for coming. We'd like to review and approve our minutes quickly. Does anybody have any questions, comments, or additions to the minutes? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve?
So move.
Thank you, Dr. Spradley. Do we have a second?
I'll second, sadly. It's Alan.
Thanks, Alan. All those in favor, please say aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Any nays? Great, we are good with the minutes, and we're gonna juggle the agenda a little bit, everyone. So we have some guests with us with some time constraints, and we are going to, make sure we can accommodate them. So we're going to hear from Action Housing, and then we're gonna go to legal. So if you're following along with your agenda, we're gonna skip a little bit.
And I just want to note for the record too, that Kelly Ware did join the meeting.
Oh, great. Welcome, Kelly.
Yeah, you can come up here and I'm gonna pull your thing up. Bear with me as I flip through slides here. It's quite a lengthy agenda.
Oh,
Here we go. It is. And for the people online, will they just be able to hear me? Yep, they can hear you from there. Oh, because there's a camera right in front of me. Right, that makes sense. Okay, thank you all. My name is Kyle Webster. I am the Vice President of Housing and General Counsel for Action Housing. I was asked to come today to give an update on the Housing Stabilization Program, the rental assistance side. HSP does refer to two programs, rental assistance and mortgage assistance. Action has been engaged to run the rental assistance side of things by DHS through their agreement with the URA. Some of you may recall, I joined digitally, virtually back in, I think it was March, to ask for a few things from you all and to also discuss how the Ask partnership was going to work. What we've done in Allegheny County is we've built off of the, actually I should go to the next one. We've built off of the successes of ERAP and have really capitalized off of the existing collaborations and infrastructure that was built through ERAP to try to streamline rental assistance and housing stabilization programs around Allegheny County, to include, of course, the city of Pittsburgh. In doing so, what we did, pre-COVID, a person facing instability had to potentially reach out to upwards of 4 or 5 different places to apply for rental assistance, to seek stability, to avoid having them and their families become unhoused. And we've made it so that there's one primary door. There are a lot of ways to get to that door, but there's one primary door, and we call that the Allegheny County Housing Stabilization Collaborative. And HSP is one of these funding sources that is accessed through this door. One thing I did want to mention was the kind of hub of this work is the Housing Stabilization Center, which is located at 415 7th Avenue. Just look in the back for confirmation, in downtown Pittsburgh. That is actually entirely funded through predominantly grants by RK Mellon and UPMC, as well as the Pittsburgh Foundation. But we're able to capitalize. Should I admit somebody if they're in the waiting room? Evan's here. Sorry.
You're now the concierge.
I'm in charge. So the Housing Stabilization Center has been the hub of this, and that has really helped quite a bit in giving an in-place place for folks to come and talk about this stuff. To give just a little context, in the month of August, 743 individual people walked through the Housing Stabilization Center's doors to receive housing stabilization services. That is a ridiculous number, but our staff, between us and the rental PGH team, has been able to help those folks as they've come together. I also just want to highlight the partners. The core collaboration is Action Housing, Rental PGH, Urban League, the YWCA, WAVE, Neighborhood Allies, and Just Mediation Pittsburgh. We are funded by Allegheny County DHS, the URA, City of Pittsburgh, RK Mellon, Pittsburgh Foundation, and UPMC. And we also have other partner agencies such as Neighborhood Allies. I should have Neighborhood Legal Services on here. My apologies for that, as well as various CDCs and community groups. So let's look at the impact. This launched in March. So this only goes until July. You'll understand soon why that really does matter, because August was a big month for the collaborative. So since July, this is where you are seeing the impact of HSP funding around the city of Pittsburgh. I will say this is by zip code, so it may look like some of these are outside of the city, like the one that goes out almost to Moon. That obviously is Ferrywood and Idlewood and other Pittsburgh neighborhoods that are encompassed in the same zip code, but the payments were all entirely within the city. So this shows you that we've been able to impact through July 111 households, giving out a total of $409,208 with a median of $4,022 per household. And the minimum we've paid has been $318 for a household. The maximum has been $6,000, and that has been that's the max. So that would be the max we could pay. Every single council district at this point has been impacted by this fund. Almost every single zip code has been. There is one zip code at this point that has not been yet. It is that zip code right there in the middle that is Shadyside. Other than that, every zip code that touches the city of Pittsburgh has received some bit of rental assistance through HSP since March. So this is where we're going to learn why also August not being on there really matters. So under the previous contract, because our contract is a July to June contract, so we had a partial contract from March through June, and then we have the current contract, which is July through June of 2024. We receive $525,000 annually from HSP as part of our contract with DHS. That's $393,750 for direct rental assistance and $131,000 for admin. So in March, the launch of the program, we spent $4,158 to one household. And since then, you see the ramp up where we spent a total of $280,265.45 through June. Then the current contract began in July of 2023. In July, we spent $130,881.66. In August, we spent $162,195.70. That is a obviously substantial spike. And that does also mean that for the July through June allocation, for the month of September, we have $100,672.64 left. I did check with our accounting department prior to this. We are down to a little bit below 80,000 now with the payments we've made in this first week of the month of September. So the HSP program, as part of Ask, will be winding down this month for this year, unless we're able to get additional funding, which obviously we would love and be open to receiving. However, a key part of Ask is, a lot of people pre-COVID, they would apply to all these different programs. They wouldn't find out when the program ran out of funding or when a new program began, et cetera. Ask is designed so that the consumer continues to have access even as programs inevitably ebb and flow. So the Ask program will very much continue, and people will continue to be assisted through the other funding sources. And we will not be closing the door on them. Just we will not have HSP funding as a part of that. Here, our estimation is we have about 2 weeks left of HSP funding. And just so you all know the full number, I forgot to write it down. It's about 174 households that we have directly impacted with HSP since we took over the program in March of 2023, which again shows you how big of a month August was, because August added quite a few households to that number. So how do we get here and where next? I already talked about a lot of this, but COVID created an unprecedented eviction crisis that we're still working our way out of. What we are in right now, those who work on the front lines of this work, which includes many of you on this board, is not the long-term status quo we hope, because that's not sustainable. We are all coming together, trying to address this unprecedented crisis together as we figure out what it looks like, given the disparities that occurred during COVID, the housing instability, the increase in rent prices, the lack of increase of especially lower paying wages, et cetera. The URA housing team, I do want to say, has been incredibly collaborative. That's also a key reason we've gotten here with HSP. There have always been barriers in rental assistance programs. Some of those barriers are necessary. Some of those barriers cause disproportionate harm, especially to single parents, to people of color, et cetera. We've been able to work with the housing team at the RA to really attack a lot of these barriers and remove the ones that aren't necessary, that may be causing undue harm. And that really has opened up the door for a lot more households to access this funding, which has been fantastic, especially during this crisis period. And this has led to an incredible impact and a faster than expected spend down, as you're seeing over the fact that we will be fully done with our annual HSP allocation in the first quarter of this fiscal year. Again, there are 4 other funding sources, so this program will continue. And other funding sources impact the various parts of Ask, so those things will also continue. It is also noticeable that because of the housing team at the URA working with Action and with our other partners, that HSP has been able to be one of the most flexible funding sources. And it's also the only source that is unique to the city of Pittsburgh, which we have unfortunately seen has been uniquely impacted by the eviction crisis that we have seen post-COVID. Ask under Action will continue until 2025. Our current contract with DHS goes until 2025. So our expectation would be that Ask, as well as 2 of the other annual funding sources in that contract, will replenish come July of 2024. That will happen automatically. We also have another funding source, which is the ARP funding. That is why our contract goes to 2025, because that's a one-time funding source that goes until that time. Allocating more HSP funds sooner that will obviously impact even more households, though I do want to highlight the impact that HSP has had in the housing instability of the city of Pittsburgh since our partnership began in March has not been minimal. And it is something that is definitely worthy of being proud of and something that we should celebrate. So that is what I was asked to talk about, and that is what I was set to present on. To ask for questions, I don't know. Any questions?
So Kyle, something I know that members of the advisory always are interested in is admin, because
Yes.
admin can sound like it's
Of course.
one thing, but it could possibly be something else. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that goes into the counselors that are working with
Yes.
folks, that goes into the intake, that goes into the application processing. Can you give the group an overview of what that admin actually entails?
Absolutely. So in order to make Ask successful, we have a multifaceted communication strategy. We have a lot of different doors, like I said, all through one door, but it's a lot of different accesses to that door. So we have staff. Staff are the key things that admin covers. Our staff includes a team of, I believe, 9 full-time employees under Natalie Ryan, who oversees our work, and who's here in this room. Those 9 individuals work very diligently with clients directly. All of them take shifts at the HSC, as well as taking shifts at home, as well as working in the downtown office of Action Housing to be accessible to tenants and landlords, both via phone, via email, as well as in person as needed. That is the biggest chunk of what admin covers, is the human beings that meet with these individuals in crisis and work to help them stabilize. The admin of Ask Total, which is a larger thing, obviously, than just HSP, covers a lot of other things, which includes like, this is a $35 million program across multiple years. There's an annual audit requirement per the federal government. That is something that admin covers. These other, making, I think last month we initiated something like 500 individual payments to make up the money that we spent. Making those 500 payments cost money. So that is, the individuals who are reconciling the money, making sure it's accurate, and then actually initiating the payment. And then on the back end, doing the 1099 for the landlord at the end of the year, as is required per the federal government. So it's a lot of those different things. It's also keeping the lights on. It's also the technology for our staff to be able to do this work. Technology is a key part of this because that helps us be accessible at any time. Our staff all have access to a phone. They all have access to a laptop. Most of them have headsets as well, so they can do calls, etc. So yeah, admin covers what it takes to make this work happen. Yeah.
A few questions. So what's the average time frame for a person to be served from application to actual funding?
So it is a very challenging number to give because it varies a lot. Just to be fair, I would say the average would be 1 month to about a month and a half to 2 months, somewhere in that range. But there's going to be people who move much faster, and there's going to be people who move much slower. A lot of that is based upon a lot of factors. Government programs require documentation. Documentation can take someone, especially a low-income person, a lot of time to gather and to get to us. Many individuals don't have access to cameras or scanners, so they have to find time to come downtown to the Housing Stabilization Center or get to the library or do something like that. So that can delay it drastically. We have people who will come into the Housing Stabilization Center from, like, they will be sent there by Judge Connolly of the Housing Court. They'll walk down there, they'll sit, they'll fill out an application, our team will process it, and a payment will be made within a week. So it can move that fast if everything is there, because that person showed up with everything. It can take, 6 to 12 months if a person really doesn't have the motivation necessarily, or the time or ability to get the documentation together in the way that we need. It is also notable, of our funding sources, only one allows for us to pay the tenant directly if the landlord refuses. So we do work with landlords as best we can. Some landlords just refuse participation, either as a business philosophy, others just because they don't want that one tenant to stay, so they won't want to participate for that one tenant. We continue to try to work with that person. Sometimes we can wear them down, sometimes we can't. So that also obviously can delay the process quite a bit.
Okay, so as part of that, are you all identifying efficiencies for those kind of longer time frame situations?
Yeah, I mean, efficiency and data driven has been two of our primary focuses, both in ERAP and now in Ask. Working in this space, as many of you who work in this space, it's an inherently inefficient space to work in, but we can still do better. So we've really worked to prioritize the things that we think can be done to speed up efficiency. That's why we also, try to figure out ways to, at this point, we ask the landlord to provide documentation that we know they'll have easier than the tenant. We'll do stuff like that to try to really speed it through. We have deliberate partnerships with key landlords that have a larger than most landlord population of tenants who need our programs, like the housing authorities, like Brandywine, like Arbors, so that we can have direct connections to them to just ask them to send us leases, send us notice to quits, etc. So we are able to work directly with those folks. So there's a lot of things like that, and we're constantly trying to work to make things even faster if we can. What I would say, I just said this in the back, a big thing I always say is that the worst thing you can do in this space is to be here because of ego. We have to be humble, so we also always welcome feedback. We always welcome critiques because we do believe that, of course, we can always do better in our process. I think that the current collaboration across all of these organizations is the best housing stabilization model we've ever adopted in Allegheny County. And I think we are a model that is among the best in the country, but of course we could do better. So I always want that feedback and want to know how people see the experience and what we can do to make it better.
Okay, two more questions.
Yeah.
So I know HOF is only one of your funding sources. I think you mentioned there were 4. What's your total program budget and what percentage of that is from HSP?
So the total program budget, it's a little confusing. So it's a $35 million contract, but that's a contract over 3 years that renews and replenishes portions of that budget. So of the 35 million, about 27 million is ARP funding. So that's the one-time ongoing funding source
Over 3 years.
over 3 years. HSP is 525 per year. We had it guaranteed for the first partial contract and for the contract that we just, kind of replenished. The expectation is that it will replenish again next year. That is obviously not guaranteed because that's between the URA and DHS. But the expectation would be that would come back in. So at the end, that would put the total URA allocation towards the 35 million would be about 1.2 million or so. 1.4 million, sorry, I did math wrong, 1.4 million.
So after the 3 years, it'll drop to so 27 will be gone. Will it just be, it will be 8 million or?
So we are working on what that looks like.
Okay,
The ongoing, I see my primary funder in the back is crying because of that reality. We are working to identify long-term sustainable funding sources. We do have a year and a half to 2 years to do that. And I think that, if I look back where we were 3 years ago and how we funded this stuff versus where we were a year ago, it has changed drastically from year to year. Was it last week? Just last week, I testified before the State House Committee on Housing. And one of the things I did talk about was funding for programs like this, given the eviction crisis that we are looking at. So we are, talking to our state funders, we work at Action with folks in Washington to try to help them understand the importance of this, to see if there's federal funding sources that can be created or identified to help with this. So yes, you are right that after that, we will be down to the 525, and then I can't remember what happened for APR annually offhand, my apologies. But we'll be down to those remaining funding sources, but our goal would be we identify other long-term sustainable funding sources in that time.
okay, last question. Can you go back to the slide, I think that had your partners or collaborators? I just wanted to
Yes.
see who that was. And can you just briefly, the core collaborative, give a high level, just briefly, just what some of your other partners do? Like what
Absolutely,
their
yeah.
role is.
Absolutely. And I will say, you're all gonna hear from some of them actually in just a few minutes.
Okay,
But,
I don't wanna be redundant,
Alright.
so,
I can talk about the ones that are not necessarily a part of that, I think.
okay.
Which, so that would predominantly be, so Urban League and YWCA, we call them our step 2 partners. What they do is, tenants who need a little bit of assistance getting kind of across the finish line with documentation. We assign those tenants to, housing, navigator folks at those organizations who are able to work with them to get the documentation we need in to be able to, approve the application and get it, to funding. So that's those 2 folks. Obviously, the Urban League and YWCA are huge nonprofits that do a lot of amazing work in this region. This is a very small subset that they partner with us on in their housing programs. WAVE is a smaller organization based in the East End that does a lot of self-sufficiency work, especially targeting single mothers. And they are an organization that we work with to do follow-up and to work with tenants who maybe don't have a long-term path for sustainability in their current housing, to help them understand how to better budget, how to better identify housing that may fit their needs, how to tap into workforce development programs and or childcare, food stamps, et cetera, to really give them a bit more of a close-knit handhold in terms of counseling and whatnot. Neighborhood Allies, we work specifically with their financial empowerment centers, which are specifically targeted to help people with managing their finances, with understanding how to do a budget, with how to do credit building, et cetera. And that's another place that we refer folks. And then Brent's Help and Just Mediation, I believe, will be a part of the later conversation, but those are also 2 amazing partners that we've worked with. Just Mediation doing mediations that come before an eviction filing to try to protect the tenant from that filing and help the landlord and tenant work towards resolution. And then Red Hook PGH does kind of on the ground casework, helping folks navigate the eviction system. They're in the courts, they're also at the HSC, helping folks get the paperwork they need, et cetera, to stabilize. Yeah, cool. Thank you. Absolutely.
So our advisory team members that are with us virtually, I want to just open space if folks have questions, because sometimes that can be difficult to get into the conversation when you're remote.
I just have one question, and really just this is for any community residents, lay people out there who are seeing all of these acronyms and might not know what they stand for. But you have them in there. Ask Allegheny County Housing Stabilization Collaborative. So I'm trying to, even as a board member, I'm trying to get my mind wrapped around how all of these programs are connected. And you just did a fantastic job of breaking down the different funding sources, the collaborative partners that I did not know that you had all of this happening with this program. So I appreciate you breaking down these acronyms. I appreciate you making the connection to the funding sources and the collaborative partners. I do. I think similar to Derek, thank you, Derek, for asking that question around how the collaborative partners were connected to this work and how they were supporting the vast number of people who are still in housing insecure spaces. So I really want to commend you guys for, first of all, bringing action to this meeting to sort of give an update and a little clarity around how HSP is being facilitated. I do have a question about the repair portion of the program though. So I heard you say, Kyle, that you guys are only focusing on the rental assistance. Is someone able to provide an update about the repair portion of the program?
Are you referring to whole homes?
Well, I'm not sure because I was under the impression that HSP covered both rental assistance and home repairs. Is that not correct?
HSP is a term used for rental assistance and mortgage assistance. You can, the Urban League is who runs the mortgage assistance side, so you can speak with them about that. Richard Morris, I believe, is the lead. There is HAP, I believe, which is a home repair program that is funded by the URA, I think out of the Housing Opportunity Fund. So HAP is probably what you're talking about, Tammy. That is a program that does still very much exist from my understanding, but I can't speak.
Great.
And there's
I appreciate that.
two HAPs. So there's the URA HAP and then there's the state funding HAP, and those do different things as well. So to your point, it can be really confusing.
Yes, you can. Okay, thank you so much.
But I will just quickly plug that Home Repairs is reopening its second round on October 16th. So that is notable. That is the big $12 million program here in Allegheny County for home repairs that touches the city and the county and is run by Action Housing.
Are there other questions? If not, thank you so much, Kyle.
I had a question for, in the next slide, when you were talking about barriers and some of them just not that one. Maybe your next one. No, maybe the next one. Okay, you're on this one. You were talking about barriers for some residents, and you said some of them are, structural, and then you said some of them are necessary. What would be an example of a necessary barrier for application?
So I think a necessary barrier for application is proof of income. That would be an example. All of these funding sources require that they assist individuals who are legally defined as low income. And we need them to somehow document that, whether that be through taxes, pay stubs, or in certain cases, self-attestation. But there needs to be some sort of documentation of that. Another example would obviously be the lease or something else that shows that the person actually does live in the property. Those are the primary kind of things that I think are the universally agreed upon necessary barriers that all of the programs do require.
Okay, that makes sense. I haven't heard that language before.
I often use language that is not common.
Any other questions or comments for Kyle?
Madam Chair, this is Councilwoman Gross.
Hello, Councilwoman.
Hi, I'm sorry, I'm driving and Zooming, so I just want to say briefly that I'm so appreciative that the HOF is providing this funding. We're still getting calls in our office for people who are facing eviction or have lack of income and are looking for exactly this kind of rental assistance. We know that Action did a fantastic job coordinating all of partners for our emergency rental assistance from the federal government. But we still need this funding. And hopefully one day we won't need the long-term funding source because we will have so much housing that we don't have people facing the need for cash assistance to keep their housing. But I am definitely going to be talking to our fellow council members who I think would be supportive of additional funding. And I also am, again, grateful to Action's work and the HOF here and hope that we can find the funding for this. That's all.
Thank you so much for those comments. So everyone, we're at about 25-3. We have a very tight agenda. So I'm actually going to, let Kyle out of the hot seat. And if there are follow-up questions that folks have, please submit those to myself or the URA, and we'll make sure that we touch back to Action to get those answered for you. Thank you so much to Action for being with us. Now we have another intense conversation, and intense in a good way. We're going to talk about the legal pieces of this situation. We have the rental assistance piece, and we have the piece of, what happens when folks are in jeopardy of losing their housing. And we have two wonderful colleagues joining us to do some presentation here. We have Swain and Aaron. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Actually, it really is perfect to go right after that presentation because we kind of are all parts of the same eviction prevention work, and without rental assistance, our programs wouldn't be anywhere near as successful. And the reverse is true as well. Without programs engaging with people, connecting us all, and working with residents to get through the rental application process, it's really the perfect synergy. So, all right. So thank you so much for having us. My name is Swain Uber. As the slide said, I work for Community Justice Project, which is a legal aid organization. I'm here with
Aaron Erb. I'm the executive director of Just Mediation Pittsburgh.
So on this intro slide, there's the logos of the various partners in this program that are specifically funded through the legal assistance program at the HOF. Some of them mirror what Kyle already mentioned, so that's Rent Help and Just Mediation, but then there are additional ones: Community Justice Project, Neighborhood Legal Services, the main legal aid program in the region, and then Pittsburgh Hispanic Development Corporation. I know Guillermo's on the line actually to present about something later, which is great, but they do wonderful work in the Latinx community with helping with resource navigation and such. And then Ebony Law is another legal partner that's newer and doing wonderful work as well.
So Swain, I think many members of the group know those other partners to some degree.
Yeah.
Ebony Law, can you just give us a 30-second? Sure.
Yeah, it's a for-profit but kind of a low bono social enterprise model. So it was created, I think, within the past 2-3 years. Their primary project is the legal assistance program. So they are one of the main partners in the Lawyer of the Day program, which we'll get into a bit. And they do great work. They, along with Neighborhood Legal Services, are the boots on the ground legal assistants in the courts, representing tenants, working with landlords, getting people's housing stabilized. So yeah, they do other great work as well that I'm sure they'd love to do. So just we want to briefly start and kind of give a disclaimer. It's kind of a long presentation. We're going to try to breeze through it to not keep everyone here too long, especially with the packed agenda that we have. But we want to make sure I believe you'll be sent this afterwards, so you can look through it. If there's something that you didn't see, obviously feel free to ask afterwards, but look through it at your own leisure later as well. Wanted to start quickly with why eviction prevention matters. There's a couple of things. Housing stabilization works. Most of the people that we work with, we will never see again. So most of the families, and we've seen this with in Lawyer of the Day in particular, about 9 out of 10 families, one intervention has been enough, and we haven't seen them again. Obviously, it's I know that's something that has been discussed before, where it's, well, we're just paying money and it's it's not enough. It's like, no, actually, people just need assistance. Most people, and the grand majority of people, just need assistance one time, one intervention, restabilize. there's also, I know Kyle already mentioned the discriminatory aspect of the eviction system and rental system in general. It's disproportionately, especially in the region, the primary defendant we see in eviction cases are Black mothers with children, and they're the ones being evicted. So that's another reason that's pretty important.
So could you speak up just a
Sure.
little bit?
One other thing that I want to emphasize is building affordable housing alone is not enough. A lot of the people that we work with in our programs are in affordable units. So, and they fall on hard times too. They need assistance. They need that rental assistance. They need legal assistance to be able to remain in their already affordable unit. So I know, you know, the URA has done a lot of great work creating more affordable units. We still need other services like rental assistance, like our programs, to keep people housed and keep people stabilized. And the last one is it saves money. The further upstream you go to prevent an eviction, the more money you save downstream. You know, Andrea is here from DHS, who works with the homelessness system. Every dollar we spend upstream saves her system a lot of money. So. Pass.
Yeah, beautiful. Again, like we've said, dense slides, you will see them later. We were going to move through to be able to just highlight the main points here. So like Swain has said, the history of LAPT is one that is addressing a chronic problem in some new ways. Eviction's been a social problem for a long time that then coincided with the COVID pandemic in pretty brutal ways. In Allegheny County before the pandemic, we were averaging about 13,500 eviction filings per year. We saw that disproportionately impacts specific populations that are already at great risk of falling into the variety of social services that are required to be able to keep people in safe and affordable situations. Facing this crisis, the URA created the legal assistance program for tenants, which we were talking about, provides legal services, provides resource navigation, and it provides mediation services to be able to help people avoid the costliness of eviction in all sorts of social and economic ways. And in that creation, we are working with a no wrong door pathway. So the thing that we wanted to create together was a system where a tenant could come to Just Mediation Pittsburgh looking for legal advice, which is not something we give, and that we wouldn't just say, okay, you can call this number and you'll be good. We would actually have a warm handoff to neighborhood legal services or sometimes Ebony Law to be able to have them work with the service even though they came to us, which happened to not be the right place. So this no wrong door entry was a very important part of the program. I'll define these kind of components of the program real briefly here too. Most of these are fairly self-explanatory. Legal assistance, providing no-cost legal advice for tenants at risk of eviction. That is through the Lawyer of the Day programming and some programming outside of this very specific program that was built through the HOF's fund. Mediation with my organization convenes the mediation, trains and provides mediators, but also really critically connects tenants who need it to legal assistance prior to a mediation so they can even know what their options are before they're talking with a landlord in such an intimate space, and connects with resource navigation, usually through Rent Help PGH, sometimes also through Pittsburgh Hispanic Development Corporation, to be able to not just have two parties talking together and saying what they want to do, but actually having the resource to then do those things. Resource navigation underneath, outside of some of these programs, is also helping to really shepherd people through these really confusing and complicated processes, whether it's rental assistance or other systems of support. And outreach outside of these three subsets as well is an area of actually making sure that we're not relying on people who have the least access to information to know what comes next, but actually proactively notifying folks when they have been filed against, which they might not know, since something like 10 to 20% of addresses in the court system are incorrect through no fault of the court system and just the nature of things moving and changing so quickly. I want to note here at the bottom, because Swain said this already, we're going after Kyle's presentation about HSP very fortuitously, because these programs could exist on their own and they would not be near as effective without how well funded and well supported rental assistance has been in the pandemic and through the URA's HOF efforts specifically. That has been a huge way to make mediation make more sense, to avoid court, to make Lawyer of the Day make a lot of sense, and to make some of these outreach efforts more coherent. We have a comprehensive picture of the LAP program here. Again, very much worth your time outside of this. What I'm going to highlight here is simply that the dotted circle for the legal assistance program notes what y'all are funding, and that this program and other programs extend way beyond that funding as well. That's the main takeaway here. You can see the Housing Stabilization Center as a one-stop shop for tenants and some landlords to be able to go in and try and get connection to rental assistance. You see landlord engagement outside of this circle, which JMP has done a lot of work with, and other organizations too, to help make sure that landlords outside of the court system are connecting well to these services. But you can see that mediation, non-lawyer of the day legal assistance in the top right. Also, and outreach and coordination efforts exist outside of what you all fund, but are critically supported by what you fund as well. So you are a big part and not the whole of what is happening here. Lawyer of the day is the singular program that operates within what HOF funds and has been a critical. Do you want to add?
Yeah, I would just add, because it's already confusing enough, that's why we didn't explicitly put rental assistance or ask in here, because it was already too much. So we wanted to at least make it somewhat intelligent.
We're going to describe these services in a little bit more detail really quick for you. Again, for your own time, we've highlighted the process of mediation at the bottom of this slide. We've highlighted some of the benefits for landlords on the right that we've advertised before, and for both parties, landlord and tenant, on the left here. In the process, JMP in the mediation process is not the sole mediation provider. We are just the organizer of the process. Just Mediation Pittsburgh receives interest in mediation from the landlord or the tenant. Does an intake, schedules the mediation, provides the mediators themselves, but then connects to neighborhood legal services for pre-mediation advice before the mediation. Connects with rent help to help both landlord and tenant navigate the rental assistance systems that are usually at play in a mediation. And then actually has the mediation happen. NLS can provide mediation agreement review if needed, and rent help can continue to shepherd people through the rental assistance process through the Ask collaborative that Kyle was mentioning earlier.
And I want also, there's general legal assistance that for people facing eviction, which I think is fairly intuitive. Generally, the old system was, someone would call neighborhood legal services, get a call back, do an intake, go through that whole process. Because of the funding from the HOF, and then in particular, the shifting and understanding and working with the providers to create a new system, we were able to launch a Lawyer of the Day program, which is where we have a team of attorneys and resource navigators in specific courts most days where there are evictions. So typically in magisterial district courts, which is the lowest rung of the court system, where cases are filed in evictions. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. We're in those courts with those teams working. We do outreach ahead of time, so rent help, with thanks to DHS and the access that they've provided for outreach. We're able to do outreach to people who are facing evictions. We're able to connect with them ahead of time, connect them to legal assistance, both Ebony Law and neighborhood legal services, and then work with them in these 4 courts as capacity and funding has provided to prevent the eviction. So working with the landlord as well, getting rental assistance applications shepherded through is one of the primary purposes of the overall program, but as well as, educating the tenant of their rights and enforcing them. So these are the 4 courts we're in. So it's all of the north side, downtown in the Hill, and then the east, Homewood and Lincoln Leamington are the 4 courts that we're in right now, which disproportionately represent 43% of all evictions. So in the city of Pittsburgh. We've talked already a lot about resource navigation. We just want to highlight it because it is often overlooked in this overall process. Without resource navigation, much like without rental assistance, we wouldn't be nearly as successful. So resource navigation is the key to unlocking rental assistance and the key to making both mediation and legal representation particularly effective and beneficial to both the landlord and the tenant. So our 2 resource navigation partners, again, Guillermo is on the line. They do wonderful specific population focused work that they're pretty much the only game in town for, and they work with their partners as well on that. And then there's Rent Help Pittsburgh, who is the premier resource navigation and eviction prevention organization in the region.
So lab successes for each of these programs, again, we'll go through very briefly. A chart whose main purpose is to show you that mediation with agreement in the bottom left 239 cases that are lap funded very specifically since the program's inception. Only 13 of those mediations did not have an agreement, which leads to about a 95% success rate when landlord and tenant do both agree to mediate together. We have seen just an explosion of demand for mediation since this program was funded. 1,500% increase in mediations from January of 2022 to present day. So just an absolute explosion, which again would not have happened without a well-funded rental assistance program and without really clear resource navigation support and the legal assistance that comes that allows tenants to actually talk to the things that they can speak to in a mediation with their landlord, so that both parties are coming with a higher degree of education about what comes next. Within the mediation program too, one thing we've done, you saw this in that very complicated graphic earlier, we have a serious landlord outreach effort, and the Housing Authority City of Pittsburgh is one example of a landlord that's really committed to mediation instead of court whenever they can do that. So since November of 2022, we've had 209 evictions prevented through HACP specifically. We're now scheduling about 40 mediations with HACP per month. So that's multiple a day with that program. And with the critical support of Rent Help's resource navigation, almost $1 million of rental arrears have been addressed in mediation, again, exclusively through the Allegheny Housing Stabilization Collaborative.
And I mentioned Lawyer of the Day, we've discussed it before, but it's a newer program that we've been able to create through assistance from the Housing Opportunity Fund. And the results, frankly, have surprised all of us. It's been extremely successful. The previous rates of evictions or I guess judgments against the tenant in magisterial district court hovered around 85% of the time. Now it's actually below 50%. So tenants are having those cases resolved at that level over half of the time. We haven't been able to find a similar comparator in any other city around the country that we're aware of. But it's really effective. It's just working well. We're working with landlords slowly. The more we engage with the landlords, they're seeing mediation as a more appealing process as well, which helps relieve some of the burden on the courts and our program. But it's something that, I mean, frankly, yeah, we're all just pretty shocked by how great it's been overall. We also there's one particular thing that I do want to point out in this slide as well, the sustainability aspect to it. So one thing that I mentioned earlier, but one thing that I think we hear a lot about is that, oh yeah, maybe you'll pay their rent this month, but then they'll be back next month. That does happen, but it's actually quite rare. So we've seen in our Lawyer of the Day courts approximately over 600 people so far, and about 10%, only less than around 10% are people who we see ever again. Like we haven't encountered them as well. And even in that second round of filings, we actually have a pretty high success rate there as well, comparable to the previous one, to the first time we see them. And actually, for the tiny percentage of people who come back a third time, it's usually when the landlord isn't willing to engage in mediation or maybe I haven't been particularly cooperative with resource navigation and rental assistance applications. We actually have the highest rate of success that third filing, which maybe seems counterintuitive, but it's what we found so far. And so LOTD, Lawyer of the Day, LOTD, extremely successful, a critical component to this overall landscape. Obviously, mediation deals with things ahead of time. That's the dream, right? We want to do that, but we also need these stopgaps later on to be able to catch people who haven't yet been able to, been addressed, had their issue addressed by the previous systems. So this is Allegheny County Department of Human Services eviction dashboard. It's very useful, but we just wanted to show that this is for the 4 courts that we're in for Lawyer of the Day within the city. You can see that, very slow rates of withdrawals, settlements, dismissals, and almost all judgment for plaintiff, who's the landlord in this case. And this is what it looks like now. So the axis does change some. So it's actually more dramatic than it may seem otherwise. But we're seeing, again, an over 50% success rate. And this is where landlords as well are getting paid for rental arrears that they probably would never see otherwise. So yeah, we could flip back and forth between these two slides all day, but you'll have the PowerPoint. And yeah, we do also want to briefly mention the legal assistance outside of the Lawyer of the Day program. That was the original, vision of the HOF. People are still being supported outside of those four courts. And they're being supported both at that initial level and at the appeal level. It is less comprehensive than Lawyer of the Day just because of limitations on capacity and funding. But yeah, Neighborhood Legal Services doing great work in the city and the county, and actually other counties as well. Ebony Law, again, because of the restriction on funding for HOF, actually take pro bono cases, which is pretty exceptional in my mind for people who would otherwise be served by Lawyer of the Day, but because there's a funding 50% AMI limit is that. And then actually through generous funding of the HOF, we've been able to work with the tenants from the Roosevelt who were facing mass displacement, along with our good friends at the Housing Stabilization Center. So but yeah, this is just, again, kind of not to put too fine of a point on it, but rental assistance really is the key to making all of this work. One thing that I do want to focus on in this chart actually is the different types of funding that go into the work that's been done so far by the LAP partners, because that large chart, the large bar, isn't HSP. It's our ARP money. So that's the federal funding that Kyle was talking about earlier. So most of the rental assistance that is accessed through these city programs isn't actually city paid. The city's not paying for that. So these programs open up access to programs funded by other entities that city residents, frankly, probably disproportionately have access to because of these programs, which, that's good, and we should support that. And any expansion of these programs would allow us to.
Again, looking at Pittsburgh Hispanic Development Corporation with Guillermo on the call, really want to highlight here just how important it is to have a partner that works with some of the people with the highest barriers to accessing some of these great services. So to have folks who are contracted to be able to put in the extra layer of time that comes with cultural and language barriers is just so critical. So PHDC referring and assisting 26 clients just this year so far, 57 families and 75 cases overall since LAP started has been very important. You see the testimonials on the right-hand side. People who work with PHDC have a really incredible experience because they're getting such a specific level of care when they run into barriers in so many other programs outside of this. PHDC, a really critical part of the outreach component, letting people know about what's going on with their eviction, or being able to help walk them through rental assistance applications or get them connected to the correct place at the correct time. I'll also note they have a lot of outreach to landlords who are willing to work with populations, again, who face barriers that in other places. So PHDC just does such a range of work that's really helpful for this collaborative. We mentioned the phrase "nowhere on door." One thing LAP funded that was so helpful was having a SharePoint site to be able to make sure that no matter where a tenant comes, they can get to the resource they need within the legal assistance program. They don't have to go to NLS to get legal aid. They can come to JMP first, and JMP will make the referral to NLS. They can go to NLS for mediation. They can go to PHDC to be able to get to mediation. This kind of collaboration is, again, something that is difficult in the nonprofit world, and maybe especially so in Allegheny County and the city of Pittsburgh sometimes. So this has just been an incredible part of what you all have funded. And I'll highlight too, just the number of 2,358 families served in the LAP program since it started in the middle of 2021. So in just about 2 years.
Guys, I hate to do this.
Yeah, we're there.
We're getting close. I don't know how many more slides you have, and I feel the questions behind it.
So what we'll highlight here really quick is that this eviction prevention collaborative is the larger umbrella that LAP is a part of. It does the same kind of work, and LAP funds a portion of it. You can see the funding sources that we have, which are increasingly moving towards public funding instead of private funding, because what I'd like to point out is that startup costs were largely funded by foundations around the area, and that was really critical. And they have made it clear, as they do to all social service programs, that they can help fund things and help do pilots. They do not do long-term ongoing programmatic operational support. You all were the first movers in this space to be able to coordinate the legal assistance program. Jeremy Carter, a couple of years ago, was so instrumental in making this happen. Since then, again, the HOF is so flexible in working to actually help us create the lawyer of the day programming. And to have that kind of nimble footwork in a program like this is just so rare. So shout outs to Derek and Brianna for being able to be there for that. And what we are saying is that as we've expanded in these types of ways, we serve a portion of city residents, and the demand far outstrips the supply that we've been able to provide through the LAP programming. Evictions on the rise, financial effects of COVID are still here. The need is greater than ever. This is our last slide.
So we already mentioned this before. The city spending and the HOF spending leverages county dollars, federal dollars, others. So, every dollar that the HOF puts in to legal assistance program opens up access for residents to other resources. To keep the legal assistance program, including lawyer of the day in the 4 courts that it's in, at the same level, it requires about $1 million per year. To expand lawyer of the day to the full city, again, I think maybe Kyle mentioned it, but some courts wouldn't actually need it based on the zip code, and that they don't see that many evictions. For example, the court in Lawrenceville doesn't see that many evictions anymore. So a full lawyer of the day program wouldn't make that much sense there. But to expand the capacity to the other remaining courts within the city that need it, that covers the remaining 57% of city residents that don't have access to this program who are in eviction proceedings. That would be closer to about 2.5 million. Again, it works. It keeps people in their homes, and we think it's something that's worth supporting. So, thank you. Sorry it was so long.
No.
Further question. We wanted to get it out to you all so you could.
Can you assist with tenants prior to the LT filing?
Yes, yeah. So that's somewhat capacity based and access based. So yes, we can and do. Habitability is also habitability issues is also explicitly within the guidelines. One of the issues is again capacity. So, but yeah, that's something that can be done.
I'll just note that mediation used to be for pre-filing and post-filing, and now is exclusively pre-filing because the demand was so high. And we had things like lawyer of the day to help support post-filing. Yeah.
Well, follow up to that question. Does mediation stop the record, stop the information from going on a tenant's record?
If it is pre-filing, yes. If it's post-filing, no.
So even if the landlord doesn't move forward with full eviction, is still on a record purpose. So if you provide if as a landlord, you put the notice to quit on someone's door, that's not a court filing, so that doesn't appear. As soon as you do go to the court and file the complaint, that will appear. And it's current state of Pennsylvania law is that will be there, and you cannot get rid of it easily.
It's also an unnecessary expense. If you go to court and then mediate, that is still a better outcome than evicting somebody and actually getting the order of possession. Is an unnecessary expense for the landlord and unnecessary stress for everybody. So that's why we've so emphasized pre-filing mediation.
And the timelines, frankly, are actually pretty similar. Mediation, because of working with the courts and rental assistance programs, et cetera, mediation can resolve issues in a similar.
What about possession? If they have been granted possession, are you able to assist with that?
Absolutely, yeah. So one shout out to the Housing Stabilization Center again, and rental assistance programs and Rent Help Pittsburgh and others. Yes, so there have been evictions prevented when the lockout was scheduled for that day. So that does happen. Again, we hope not to get to that point. It's better to do all of that way earlier. And I believe actually Kyle was here a couple of months ago to talk about a specific rental assistance kind of program to address that exact issue. So, and it's been working. So thank you for that as well.
I'm gonna ask folks that are joining us virtually to just open space up. Do we have questions from our virtual audience since we can't see you?
Yeah, this is Mark Masterson. Just had a question about how many tenants are having eviction issues where the landlord is either public housing authority or it's been publicly funded affordable housing. Like what would you what's the estimate on the percentage?
Yeah, two parts to that answer. Thank you, Mark. One, our outreach efforts, especially for the mediation program, have allowed for the Housing Authority, City of Pittsburgh, and Allegheny County Housing Authority to commit to mediating instead of evicting people for almost all of their cases. I know they are now evicting a very small portion of their residents who are behind on rent, et cetera, but they have really fully committed to mediation to the point where HACP is mediating 40 cases a month.
And I would just show this specific chart again, not for the purpose of gloating or bragging, but because if you look at the top and you see the number of filings in 2019 over this time period, it was around 1,500. This year over that same time period, it's closer to 1,000. A lot of that is because of mediation. A lot of that is specifically because the housing authority is participating in mediation. So yes, there is a huge chunk. I mean, there's also a lot of affordable, and I guess publicly, to your second question, Mark, publicly funded or subsidized housing. Yeah, we see that very, very frequently. It'd be hard to put a specific number on it. I know prior to COVID, it was 30% was the general number, but we probably see around that still.
So we're gonna take one more question, either from our virtual audience or our in-person. Have any final questions?
I didn't want to, if no one else had, I just wanted to do a follow-up. Does the housing authority or other, and this is a question I'm concerned about as a board member of HOF, there should be a grievance process or something with publicly funded housing. And it would stop people from running to the court to file an eviction. And is that not the case with the housing authority? And I guess and we can answer this later at another meeting for the HOF funded affordable housing, but we have a grievance provision in our documents as we provide funding for rental gap program.
So you should have asked that question when Kyle was up here. But specifically, so a grievance, well, and we don't need to get too deep into the weeds, but a grievance proceeding would not mean that they couldn't later file an eviction. That's the first step in moving towards that process. And not all publicly funded developments are required to do that. I believe LIHTC funding doesn't have any sort of restriction. Public housing does, obviously, like you mentioned, and I'm not sure about it yet.
And Mark, we can put that on the HOF agenda for a later meeting to talk more about that with projects that we fund.
Thanks.
Well, thank you so much, gentlemen. The whole point of us doing this back in person is really so that we can have deeper dives, more intelligent conversations, because we are making allocations. We want voices to be heard. This is not the only opportunity, but this is really important. And we hope that we're going to be able to do this more regularly. So throughout the year, we're getting this information so decision-making can be as intelligent as possible. So we appreciate you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. Yeah, and again, reach out with any questions. I believe you can maybe have our emails sent out with the things. Yeah, reach out.
We will Google you. And folks can also send to the HOF.
Thank you.
Okay, so again, I'm gonna apologize to everybody online for skipping around in the PowerPoint here since we're going very out of order. But next we're gonna have the resettlement agency. Some of the resettlement agencies here in Pittsburgh talk about. Want to discuss with us. So I don't think any of them are here in person. So whoever is online and present, feel free to begin.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting us today. Today, we are a group of individuals representing refugee resettlement agencies and also immigrant-based organizations to talk about the challenges and also the contributions that immigrants bring to the city. So we have Dr. Yinka Williams. She is the Executive Director of AJAPO. Guillermo Velasquez, as you already heard, he is the Executive Director of PHTC. We have Andy Pach, he is the Director of Refugee Resettlement at Hello Neighbor. Me, Yvonne Smith Tapia, I'm the Director of Refugee and Immigrant Services at JFCS. And Kaylee Donovan, she's the Site Supervisor for Refugee Resettlement at Bethany Christian Services. So I'm going to let Yinka start us off with the presentation. Yinka, are you there?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Yinka Aganga Williams, and I'm the Executive Director of AJAPO. AJAPO is a refugee resettlement agency. We are based in the Hill District of Pittsburgh, and we've been here for the past 21 years. I would like to start by saying resettlement of refugees, as many of us will know, is a life-saving measure, and it impacts a very, very small percentage of the world's most vulnerable people. This is because even though we have this plan as United States to invite in up to 125,000 next year, you will find out that that is not even anywhere near 0.5% of those that are suffering all over the world. Having said that, in order for refugees to be admitted to the United States, and this is just to kind of let you know a little bit about the process, there has to be a presidential determination. And as such, it is Congress that actually determines the number of admission that we have every year, because they're the ones who approve and let the president know that, yeah, we will have this many people kind of coming in any year. Now, coming to this region, and by that I mean the city of Pittsburgh and Allegheny County. In the past 2 years alone, resettlement of refugees brought us over 8.2 million in the region. In other words, that is the amount of money it added to our economy within this region. And I mean city of Pittsburgh, Allegheny County. These are all funds that the feds and states kind of give to us, or gave to us specifically, these 4 agencies to expend within this region. Having said that, about 5 million out of that actually went to landlords around here. That's part of what they kind of earned. So it's not as if economically it is not viable, but it goes beyond that, because practically all of our refugees, they work. And as they work, they contribute to the economy of our region. They pay their taxes, they do almost everything else that we do, expend their money within the county. What services do we provide? We provide services to support the refugees so that they can grow within, pick them up at the airport. They're our first contact, or rather we are their first contact as they come into the country. Search for housing for them, place them in housing, refer them for health services, school enrollment for their kids. We enroll the adults in ESL classes. We place them in job, write up their resume, help them see what is marketable if they bring some, and if they do not, we see how we can still direct them to get jobs, even if it's at entry level. And then we continue their case management for 5 years. So you can see they're here with us on a longer term, in particular because the government welcomed them, the government will allow them to work, the government will allow them to become citizens by the time they are 5 years here. Having said that, I will hand over to my other colleague, Guillermo.
Thank you, Doctor. So I'm Guillermo with the Pittsburgh Hispanic Development Corporation. We're a community and economic development organization. We do have a business incubator, an employment program, and also a housing program. And within the housing program, we are the only Latino organization that does housing. And I'd like to explain to you the process. But before I do that, I would like to acknowledge to you that the Latino population has been increasing dramatically in the region. Within the last 10 years, the population increased 80%. So that's about 36,000 new Latinos that are in the region. So that means that there's more inquiries for people looking for jobs, for houses. We do help them with rentals and also with home ownership. So all the inquiries that we receive usually come from our partners. Those are other Latino organizations that also have other services within the Latino community. And then we just, start that process basically in getting in contact with the people, understanding their inquiries, what kind of location is preferred for them, do they have children, what's gonna work for them best. Sometimes we have to make decisions as to, can they stay there for 1 year and then we move them to another location, to another neighborhood. There's all these different kind of variables that we have to also consider when we are assisting people. Of course, we do all of this in Spanish, Portuguese, and English when needed. But 90% of what we do is in Spanish, about 5 to 8% in Portuguese. We do have bilingual navigators that speak Spanish, and also we have those that speak Portuguese. So we're providing the services in those two communities, because many times there's a confusion that the Latino community is always only Spanish. So when we do all of that, we also have monthly meetings with our partners being in this particular case, Casa San Jose and the Latino Community Center. So our case managers meet monthly and to review the cases and to understand what's going on. They also continue the process and the follow-up. Normally, once we help somebody and a family, we also seek which other things we can help them, such as rent assistance or eviction. As you heard, we're also part of the eviction program. So it's not just getting them in a house, whether it's a rental, and then moving forward, we also do educational programs so that they can learn about how they can eventually buy a house. So we do home ownership courses and workshops because many of them they do not understand the culture of savings. So we have to get them educated in that so that they can think that they can own a house. The main goal is that we empower them and we make them home ownership. They will stay in Pittsburgh. They will establish roots here, and that will create wealth for the region. And I will pass now the presentation to Andy Block.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andy Pugh. I am the Director of Refugee Resettlement for Hello Neighbor on Hamilton Avenue in Larimer. And it's great to be part of this team making this presentation to all of you. And I'm just going to show you two brief slides to paint the picture. Approximately 2,000, slightly less refugees arrived during this federal fiscal year from October 1st, 2022 to September of 2023. And that number is not, there's been a rush of refugees coming in September across the state. So that number is likely to go past 2,000 before the day is done. Most of those refugees are from Afghanistan, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Syria, Tanzania, Guatemala, Ukraine, Myanmar, and Colombia. And about half of the newly arrived refugees are children under 18. If the next slide, please. And I don't have numbers for Pittsburgh, although the resettlement agencies are mostly settling refugees in Pittsburgh, the city of Pittsburgh. But you can see that the actual number of refugees resettled in Allegheny County varies a lot. from year to year. And so much of this depends on the presidential determination that Yinka mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, that every president signs every year a determination of how many refugees will be allowed in the US. And then that trickles down to Pennsylvania and also to Allegheny County. And the number for 2022 was much larger than the previous 8 years. And a lot of that has to do with Afghans who came after the evacuation of Kabul. And the number for 2023, again, is an estimate, but that's going to go way up because of there's been a significant number of new arrivals coming in August and September of 2023. But I just want to give you a picture, and thanks again for listening. And now I'm going to pass the baton to Yvonne Tapia-Smith of Jewish Family and Children's Services to continue the presentation. Yvonne, over to you.
Thanks, Sandy. So you have heard us use different terms, refugees, immigrants. This is a very complex picture. Regardless of our immigration status, we are an economic, social, and cultural driving force in the region. We are very proud that Pittsburgh has been recognized as a welcoming city. We are the 12th city in the United States to achieve that status. Local government, businesses, and community members recognize the contributions that immigrants bring to the city. Overall, many reports and studies show that immigrants are contributing to the economy. You can see some numbers there. These numbers are not updated. On Monday, there is going to be a new report with more updated information. But the study done by the New American Economy in 2019 shows that immigrants in Pittsburgh accounted for about 1.2 billion of tax revenue. While we are participating in the workforce, we provide valuable support to the native-born population, and we help the city to stay vibrant and to help all of us to live a better life. However, despite of all of these contributions, we faced many challenges in accessing basic needs, from accessing medical care, food stamps. I'm not sure if you are aware that regardless of our status, someone with a work visa, someone as a green card holder, has to wait 5 years in order to access benefits. And this is very challenging in housing. So we're going to focus our challenges on housing, of course, because of the topic of this conversation. So I'm going to allow Kaylee to dive in more in the challenges that immigrants face regarding housing.
Thank you, Yvonne. Yeah, so all of our agencies, one of the main things that we're doing is helping new arrivals to Pittsburgh with finding housing, whether they are refugees or other kinds of immigrants. And our goal is to find housing that is, of course, safe for them and also affordable for them in the long term when they're paying it themselves so that they can stay here and continue to contribute. But we're having a lot of difficulties in finding and accessing affordable housing. So it's very hard to find like a central list of all affordable housing in the area or a streamlined process to apply. There are many different processes depending on the management company or the landlord for different affordable housing options. Additionally, a lot of the requirements for housing applications and income requirements are especially difficult for the families that we're working with. So many of them have documentation that landlords may not be familiar with, as well as when they're first arriving, they don't have income or work history, not because they haven't been working or they're not going to work, but because they just simply haven't been here. Additionally, many refugees and immigrants, when they're first arriving and looking for housing, don't have a social security number. And although some of them, like refugees, will later acquire one, this is really challenging when doing standardized applications because there isn't any room for adjustment or substitution of documentation. Additionally, as I mentioned, they're frequently not initially employed because they're new arrivals. And so they're not considered financially stable, even though they likely will be within a couple of months, and they're not considered competitive with other prospective tenants, even though they come with a lot of support that other tenants might not. And additionally, the lack of language accessibility or trained staff at different housing departments or housing authorities could make it really hard for refugee and immigrants who are trying to access the housing authorities or subsidized housing. We know that there are a lot of good programs already in place for assisting with rental assistance, but there are also some challenges that we face when trying to help clients access them. So for the first thing, information on this assistance is often a little bit difficult to access. For example, when we were looking for information on the Housing Stabilization Fund, we weren't able to find it on the website. The links were broken in some of the places it was linked to. And so if it's hard for us, imagine how hard it is for families we're working with who don't speak English fluently. Additionally, there's frequently interpretation or translation issues when trying to access it. So a lot of the programs now do provide interpretation when they meet with them, but may not have access to interpretation when texting or calling to set up those initial appointments, or when following up or providing documentation. And that can make it really difficult for families to continue on the process. It's also usually a long, complicated process, which is very difficult if they don't have someone assisting them directly. It takes a case manager a lot of time over several months to get a family through every step of this process. And for families that no longer have a case manager assisting them, it's almost impossible. And then finally, and probably the biggest challenge and what we're here to talk to you about today, is that all of the housing programs that we have right now in the city are designed to address issues for people already in housing, to prevent them from losing that housing, prevent eviction. But they're not really designed to help enable these families to get into housing for the first time. And so we're looking for opportunities or support to incentivize landlords to rent to refugees. And to talk a little bit more about that, I'm going to pass it back to my colleague, Yvonne.
So we are here, thanks, Kaylee. We're here to make a proposal to you. This proposal is not the most innovative. It will be innovative for us, but other states have implemented versions of this. We would like you to consider creating a rental assistance fund for new Americans. This fund will have two purposes. On one hand, it will help immigrants facing unexpected challenges in their life cover rent to avoid evictions and homelessness. On the other hand, this fund will motivate landlords to rent to immigrants. Many landlords, when they know that there are funds available, that the government support immigrants and refugees, they will be more willing to set some flexibilities and to rent to refugees. Many people think that renting to immigrants and refugees is risky, and having the support of the URA, the city, and the local government will help us a lot with outreach and to educate landlords so we can have access for immigrants to get access to housing, I want to showcase two examples of how different cities have dedicated funds to create strategies like this one. The Michigan State Housing Development Authority provided about $500,000 to pay for emergency housing through hotels and Airbnbs when immigrants were not able to find housing. Wayne County in Michigan used a portion of the ERA 2 funds for helping immigrants with rental assistance for about a year. And they're also dedicating funding to create affordable condo units for refugee families. Another good example is the City Council of Columbus. They created the Afghan Neighbors Rental Assistance Fund. As Andy mentioned, last year and the year prior, we received an unexpected number of Afghans, and many cities got together to find solutions for them. They are expected to assist 520 Afghans to secure housing. So as I mentioned before, these are not new, but we don't have these strategies or this type of fund in Pittsburgh. And based on their experience, we think this is a successful strategy. Resettlement agencies and immigrant-based organizations have been critical in other cities to help create these type of funds. And we are committed to working with the city, with the URA, and with other key stakeholders to find solutions to help us address the housing crisis for immigrants and refugees. So I know this is a lot of information, so we will welcome any questions that you have for us.
Well, I thank you so much for presenting today. I just want to address, thank you for presenting a concept for funding. Today's meeting, we won't be able to dive into that at all. We're just going to be opening the allocation process at the next meeting. The strategy that the group might use to invite conversations on new proposals is something that we're going to have to table. So I apologize, we won't really be able to dive into that today. But if folks have questions about the materials that were presented, or questions about any of the programs, we can take those now.
I have one question. So there was a chart that was up on the screen, and it talked about basically referrals to available housing that you all have available. So my question is, how do you ascertain your housing stock? If that makes sense. Or are you building your own housing, or
Yes, I think that maybe you're referring to PHTC graphic.
I can speak to that. So we have built our network of landlords and real estate companies organically. And the different programs that have been in existence, such as the ERA program and the CARE program, kind of help us to help individuals. Therefore, landlords were more inclined to work with us. Also, once they know that there is a community organization involved, they feel more comfortable. So a landlord may refer us to another landlord that may have 5 properties, a real estate company that may give us access to 50 properties. So that's how we can stock our properties. Now we have placed 108 families in houses, and so it's kind of like it's been building like that way. But like Yvonne mentioned, having some kind of formal program will be very, very key to continue building more landlords.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, and basically all of the resettlement agencies, and I'm going to use our a struggle. It's very, very hard for us to find housing. We don't have a pool of housing available for us. For this month, just to give you an example, JFCS has to find 25 homes for families that are moving to the US into Pittsburgh for the first time. So we have a very fast flow of immigrants that are, so as Guillermo says, PHTC has created a flow of organic pool of landlords, JFCS as well, and all of the agencies have some landlords that we already know and have worked with them, but this is not enough. So that's why we need support of outreach of many landlords to help us find housing for immigrants and refugees.
Even though we have landlords working with us, for example, PHTC has 21 families on a waiting list right now because we don't have enough properties to place them. And there's also other factors that come in place, such as the schooling and where they are working. So there's many factors that may interfere into what will be the right location for them.
And I just have to apologize to everyone. We have to do a vote today, and we're starting to wind down on time. So for all of the folks here, please submit questions back to me or the URA staff. To our guests on the phone, we will be happy to reconnect and invite you back to a next meeting. We just had a really full agenda today. So we will definitely follow up with any questions, and we certainly invite you to come back to a next meeting. We are going to try to do these in person more frequently, so there's more opportunities for dialogue and public comment. I am so sorry this happened to be such a heavy agenda day, and we thank you so much for coming and sharing this really critical information, and we will not let the conversation lapse or die out. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So folks, I'm going to take some executive authority. We're going to move to our voting item on the agenda. I want to make sure we can look at the application that's in, and also have our presentation on the great work that was done collecting information on priorities. So if we can get through those 2 agenda items before the end of the meeting, I think it's going to be great.
So Victoria, if you are on the call, feel free to take it away.
I am in fact on the call. Hello. Good afternoon. My name is Victoria Jackson and I'm a lending analyst with the Residential Lending and Investments Department here at the URA. Today I'm presenting a rental gap program loan request from Beacon Communities and Uptown Partner CDC to finance the new construction of the Standard on Fifth. The Standard on Fifth will be a 51 unit apartment complex located uptown in the Bluff neighborhood. Of the 51 units, 40 will be affordable to renters up to 60% AMI, and 17 of those units will be supported by project-based vouchers. Additionally, Beacon will also provide residents with the opportunity to connect with services to address needs around food insecurity, home ownership, behavioral health, literacy, and workforce development. The proposed $1,600,000 loan will be sourced with $1 million of HOF rental gap program funds and $600,000 of home funds. The $1 million will need to be approved by this board in order to move forward with seeking approval from the URA board. The loan itself will have a 40-year term at 0% interest and carry a 40-year affordability period enforced by a deed restriction on the 40 affordable units. The repayment schedule of this loan will be based on 50% of the annual cash flow. Regarding other financing sources, the project is awarded a 9% low-income housing tax credit and a Pennsylvania housing tax credit award. The project also has a commitment for permanent financing from PHFA. Beacon Communities does also have applications under review for additional gap financing from the Housing Authority of the City of Pittsburgh through its project-based voucher gap program, as well as the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency, the aforementioned PHFA, through its Development Cost Recovery Program. We expect to see those financing decisions from both those sources sometime in fall 2023. So once again, we are requesting authorization of $1 million in HOF funds as part of the overall $1,600,000 loan commitment to finance development activities for the Standard on Fifth. Today, we are joined by Dr. Brittany McDonald of Uptown Partners, as well as Jessica Sheldon and Maggie Dudley of Beacon Communities. They are here to comment and also to answer any questions that this board may have about the project. With that, I will open the floor for questions.
Advisory members that are present or online, do we have questions on the project?
Yeah, I had a question about the unit breakout. Am I understanding that 9 of the 11 family units or 3-bedroom units would be affordable? Am I reading the chart right on the unit information in H?
Yes.
And that the units would be affordable to 50% or less of median income?
Yeah, so there are 2 slated for 20% AMI and 7 slated for 50% AMI.
Okay.
And if there are further details, I believe Maggie and Jessica are both on the call if they'd like to provide further information. Just want to give them that opportunity as well.
Yeah, sorry for any miscommunication with Victoria. There are 11 3-bedroom apartments in total. All of them are affordable. 9 of them have project-based vouchers associated with them.
Oh, I'm sorry, then I did misunderstand.
The other 2 are low-income housing tax credit units.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mark, I misunderstood your question. Thanks, Jessica.
We did have a question. What are the anticipated accessibility features for the sensory impairment units?
So we have a mix of fully UFAS ADA compliant units, as well as some hearing and visually impaired compliant units. The fully UFAS units will have grab bars and greater clearance ranges in compliance with those standards. The hearing and visually impaired units will have those special additional features are visual alerts for doorbells, as well as for any emergency alarms, smoke detectors, those kinds of things, as well as a visual intercom with guests at the front door.
Do we have additional questions?
Yes, what's the timeline on the project? just curious, and also the PHTC equity, can you kind of elaborate on what that is?
So we hope to, we're planning to start construction the end of this year or early 2024 at the latest. As Victoria said, we have the 9% tax credit award from PHFA, which is a great milestone. And so just looking to put together the final commitments and get into construction. I believe the PHTC is a new low-income housing tax credit that's issued by the state of Pennsylvania. So it's a program that the state adopted a couple of years ago, and last year was the first year they made commitments. So typically affordable housing projects can be subsidized with the federal low-income housing tax credit that has been used for years. Pennsylvania now has a Pennsylvania specific tax credit. So our investor has a tax benefit for their state taxes in addition to their federal taxes. And as a result, the investor puts more money into the development of this property.
Okay, that's the state tax credit. Okay, thank you.
We did have a comment from one of our partners suggesting that for these particular units, it's incredibly important to think about how we're marketing and doing outreach, wanting to make sure we have the most equitable access to units. So one of the suggestions that came in from a partner to the HOF is that marketing should really look at local spaces, including houses of worship, and especially those spaces that may have alternate language services available, so that a larger, wider group of folks could have access and understanding of the project. And I think that really speaks to our last presentation of, resettlement is a huge issue locally, and being able to access as many diverse groups as possible for the marketing really helps us to drive those equity agendas.
Yeah, I agree. We're hoping to market as broadly as possible. And the tenant selection plan will be reviewed by the URA, and we welcome feedback and suggestions on how to expand that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Do we have any other pressing questions before we go to a vote?
Yeah, just to sort of carry the conversation a little bit about some things we were hearing with earlier presentations. How do you handle evictions, or do you have a policy or procedure to speak and do something different with other ways to resolve those instead of eviction and filing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are a landlord, but we are a mission-oriented landlord with a services team on staff. We approach our property management through a strategy we call blended management. So that means our services team working with our property management team to resolve issues, whether they be lease violations or rent payment issues. Our services team, kind of social worker, case manager type folks, they can help connect folks with some of the rent assistance that you all were talking about earlier. So making sure that our residents, if they are falling behind, the property manager will bring in that caseworker and connect with, if it's all voluntary, but if the resident wants to participate, try to connect them with these resources in the community. So try to follow as much of that to keep people housed as possible. And eviction is absolutely a last resource. We measure, keep track of our vacancy, our turnover rates, and keeping folks housed, and housing stability is one of the top metrics we look at and one of our top goals as an organization.
And do you do any sort of mediation if that it comes to that, or, and if so, like how would you do that? Who would you use?
It's getting a bit beyond my expertise in terms of property management, in terms of whether we use formal third-party mediation, but I'd be happy to get back to you on that.
Maybe using one of the partner agencies that we heard about today with Just Mediation might be a way to go if you don't have something specific.
Yeah, I will look into that.
Thank you.
So from our members that are with us, do we have folks that need to abstain from a vote before we go into a voting process?
Yes, I do.
So Derek Tillman has acknowledged that he needs to abstain from this vote. Do we have others? Hearing none, do we have a motion on the floor related to this project?
I'm sorry, this is Karen. I probably should abstain from this vote as well.
Well, we will note that. Thank you, Karen.
So moved.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure who just moved.
Oh, that was Tammy, Tammy Thompson.
So Tammy, you have moved to authorize the URA to enter into a rental gap program loan agreement with the borrower, Standard BC LLC, or a related entity in the amount of $1 million for the new construction of the Standard on Fifth.
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Do you have a second?
Second.
Thank you so much. We have our second on record. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposition in the vote? And we've already categorized our abstentions for Derek. Thank you so much. And we had 2 abstentions. Thank you, everyone. Again, we're sorry that we're rushing a little bit. If we have follow-up questions, I'm sure the developer will be gracious enough to entertain any follow-up we'd like to do. Thank you so much to Standard BBC LLC. Motion has carried. So we have the annual allocation report, and I'm so sorry this is going to be short and sweet.
Yeah, so I'm gonna bring up one of my colleagues from the URA as well. So what we're gonna discuss is the 2024 HOP Annual Allocation Plan Community Feedback Survey that we put together. We put together a report / memo for the board, which we will distribute to you all next week. At the same time, when we distribute this, we're gonna send out the forms for you to fill out your recommendations for the annual allocation for next year. So that will all come at one time to you at the beginning of next week at some point. So just due to the nature of time, I am going to share this document, and we're just gonna very briefly, touch some of the topics. I'm gonna allow John to do most of the talking because he put together a lot of the data analysis for us from the survey. So he's gonna be doing most of the speaking to kind of just walk us through, what the results of this survey were. But we are just gonna briefly kind of go through what's in this report. We just have a brief executive summary. We're gonna talk about the survey methodology and demographics and results. And then at the end, there's just a brief section that I'm gonna talk about what some of the other funding sources are and some of the market trends that we're going to discuss. But I'm going to let John take it away so that we can get into the part that everybody actually cares about.
Welcome, John.
Thank you. And I realized that this isn't sharing for everybody here, which is interesting. Can everybody online see this PDF?
Yep.
Okay. Weird that it is not showing up on our screen here in person.
If you want to act it out, we're fine with that.
Yeah, I mean, we will distribute this report to everybody, so at least everybody online can see it, but yeah. But we'll share this with everybody and you'll be able to, talk about it.
Thanks, John. My name is John Vanello.
Scroll through.
Okay, yeah. So I'm John Vanello. I'm a data evaluation specialist in the Strategic Data and Impact Unit at the URA. I worked with the Housing Department and the Advisory Board to help draft the survey and then disseminate it. And then I did the analysis for it as well. The survey we received submissions over 3 months of collection starting May 2nd and ending July 1st. We received a total of 603 responses, which I was really excited about. We distributed a web link through through social media, email campaigns, QR codes on flyers. There were also paper copies available at community meetings. And a mail campaign. We collected on a survey collector called Alchemer, very similar to SurveyMonkey, but a little bit nicer in terms of some of the survey capabilities. We received 579 English language responses and 24 Spanish language responses. We analyzed English language responses separate from Spanish language responses, as the Spanish translation is not as direct. And so we didn't want to make direct comparisons, and also because the sample sizes are so different, we didn't want to conflate any trends in the Spanish language analysis with the English language trends. I always like to start by going through some of the demographics of the sample, just so that we can characterize which voices are present and which voices are absent. In terms of housing status, everything about these visual, I'll kind of go through. Okay, so in terms of resident status, starting with just English language, the majority of respondents were homeowners at about 59.9%. The next renters, 27.8%. And then we had 12.3, or I'm sorry, we had 5.4 saying that they lived with someone who was a homeowner or a renter. We also had around 20%, a little more than 20%, indicating they were housing advocates or social services providers. In terms of age, pretty even distribution, around 20% for 25 to 34, 35 to 44, 55 to 64, 65 and older. A little bit less representation for 18 to 24, and then 45 to 55. When we are looking at race, the vast majority identified as white, 59.1%, followed by 30.3% indicating they were Black or African American. Those identifying as biracial, multiracial, Asian, American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian, each less than 5% for this. 88.5%, most people said, did not identify as Hispanic or Latino. 3.2 identified as Hispanic or Latino. In terms of income, this was pretty interesting. More than 50%, almost 60% made more than $50,000, with about a quarter of respondents indicating they made more than $100,000. So a little bit heavier on higher income respondents for this survey.
And one thing I will note there, though, just in comparison to last year's survey, there was a much higher rate of high income individuals than there were in comparison. So looking at this, it is a much better outcome than what we had the previous year. So I just want to highlight that, because it is definitely a trend in the right direction.
Okay, that's exciting. I actually didn't know that. 12.8% of respondents identified as belonging to the LGBT community. So a little bit lower percentage. The majority of respondents identified as cisgender women. Less than 1% of respondents identified as transgender. And also the majority, almost 80%, identified as heterosexual. In terms of protected populations, almost half of the respondents indicated they belonged to one or more protected populations. So those would be racial or ethnic majority or minorities in the area that they're living, living with young children, single parents, religious minority in the area they're living, differently abled people, people receiving assistance from Section 8 or housing vouchers, immigrants or refugees. The largest groups would be racial or ethnic minorities in the area that they're living or living with young children. We asked respondents, the meat of the survey asked respondents to rank housing interventions, 8 housing interventions, current housing interventions from 1 to 6. So it's a subset, not every intervention got ranked on every list. That means that each intervention was assigned a relative priority based on an average rank and then the total number of rankings. The top three current housing interventions were building more affordable housing for rent, building more affordable housing for sale, improving and preserving existing housing stock. There were some interventions that received a higher average rank, but also received like a lower total number of rankings. So we wanted to reconcile some of those differences by looking at 10 identified subpopulations. So those would be people identifying as Black or African American under $50,000, Black or African American over $50,000, white under $50,000, white over $50,000, the LGBTQ population. What else did we do? Protected populations, less than $50,000 income regardless of race, greater than $50,000 regardless of race. So we tried to compare if there were differences in rankings depending on whether they belong to any of those groups.
And one thing I'll mention before he moves on, just in the, the way that we set up all of the different housing interventions that are presently occurring, they're all tied directly into one of the programs we presently are doing. So just for everybody to note, the top three that are there in terms of programming are number one being the rental gap program, second one being the for sale development program, and then the third one being our home repair program, the homeowner assistance program.
When we looked at the crosstab, so the subpopulations, improving and preserving existing housing stock, so that would be half, was ranked higher by respondents identifying as white with combined household income of less than $50,000, members of the LGBTQ community, and those belonging to protected populations. Building new housing stock for rent or sale, so both of those they were both ranked higher by respondents identifying as Black or African American. Helping small landlords improving quality of their housing stock for rent was ranked lower, and legal assistance for renters and homeowners was ranked higher. So that's sort of a combination. That was reported by respondents with a household income less than $50,000, regardless of race, members of the LGBTQ community, and those over 45. And then flexible spending for new programs was ranked higher by respondents identifying as white with a combined household income of less than $50,000. And also members of the LGBT community and those ages 18 to 44.
So I'm just gonna use this as a natural break. We have 4 minutes remaining in the meeting. I am really heartsick that we're not getting to really dive into this. But I know that we've already had 4 members leave in the last 10 minutes. So we just have 4 more minutes. So
yeah, so
my apologies.
I will say, like, you will get the whole report. There's a lot in here. It's a pretty extensive report. We tried to slice the data in as many ways as possible to help make decisions. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out and I can go through this in a little bit more detail with you. And then
maybe we can do, so our next agenda is gonna have the allocation piece, and I'm not cutting you off. I just know that you're gonna be losing people every minute that we're here. But maybe we can start the next meeting with a presentation of highlights, because I do apologize. I do not want to be disrespectful to the team. This was so much great work, and I know we all want to absorb it, and I don't want to give it short shrift. So for members that are still with us remotely and here in person, we're going to get this report. We really need to do our due diligence to take a look. If you want to send me any questions that you really want to deep dive into when we're meeting, that would be great, because we can prep the staff. So we will plan that we'll have first thing a recap of these results. But I'm just asking all of our members, please take a dive into this report and please give us some preemptive questions so that we can plan appropriately for time, because we do want to give the respect to the URA team and really understand this data, because this is how we're going to be decision making. And I don't want us to miss all of this really good information that we need to use in that process.
yeah.
Well, I just want to add, because a lot of the advisory board members might be going through this for the first time. So ultimately what we're trying to get to is a final approved annual allocation plan by city council sometime in late November or early December. So the roadmap here that we're looking at is at the HOF advisory board in October, creating a draft allocation plan that basically has everyone's thoughts on what they think it should be. We come up at that meeting with whether it's an average or just have a dialogue on what that draft looks like. And that'll be posted publicly for a month for public comments. And then the HOF advisory board at the November meeting will get a final plan approved. The URA board will approve that, and then subsequently city council will. So the homework for the next month basically is once Jads and John sent out this report, that can help to inform what you put into your own personal draft allocation plan. We'll collect that and have that information at the October meeting. So just to let everyone know why we're doing this and what the next few steps look like.
Yeah, and like John said, this is a very lengthy report, so we're really only plan to touch on the highlights of it today anyway, but we can absolutely do some highlights at the next meeting. And kind of gear it toward specific questions that people might have. But we, like Evan mentioned, we do want to have your budget recommendations though prior to the next meeting, so that we can go over that and create the draft plan. So I would recommend, going over this sooner rather than later, and then asking any questions as this month progresses so that we can kind of get back to you. I'm more than willing to have a conversation, outside of these meetings to talk about any of the questions you might have, just so that you can get your budget recommendations in and we can make sure we meet the timetables to get the annual allocation plan done.
And I'm just going to again recommend to folks, if you send questions to me, we can put the answers out to the whole group. So if we get these pre-meeting questions, then we can do some circulating of information prior to the meeting. And then if there are pressing things that you want to talk to John about, especially, we will have the time to do that. So you're going to get a lot of homework. This is going to be a heavy homework month. Settle in with your kids. We've got reports to read. We've got questions to ask. Thank you for everybody participating. This was a really wonderful meeting. We hope to be in person going forward. Thank you to the URA for making the change with us. And do we have a motion for adjournment?
One quick comment before you do that. Considering how important this part of it is and how important the feedback would be to have early, can you, when this is circulated, just give us a, hey, I would like to have it by, so that just
Sure
for
will.
all of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just that it would be cool to have it by, you don't have to smack us in the head, but just so that we have a sense, how we can, sort of plan, this with the rest of the stuff that we have going on.
That's a
Yeah.
great suggestion.
So I will say, in terms of timing, like I said, we're gonna try to send this out at the beginning of next week. And then really, as long as I get everybody's budget recommendations by about a week prior to our meeting, so let's
Just say that in that, when you send it out, say that, I would like to have it by so that I can,
Yes.
get it all compiled.
I'll throw a specific date and time in there for you.
Thank you.
But just a heads up, it would be the end of September, the last week.
Thank you.
Do we have a motion for adjournment?
Motion to adjourn?
Thank you so much, Dr. Bay. Thank you, everyone. We will see you on October 5th and be looking for these emails.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Thank you all.
everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good one.